6 years ago, next Thursday, will be the anniversary of our son's death. I'm a mom of three. Nicole is 24 now. She was 18 at the time this all went down. Trevor, my youngest, he's a senior this year. He's 18. He was 12 at the time. And Chris, my middle son, he is the one who passed away. He was 17. He would be 23 if he were living today. 6 years ago, there was a new drug out. It was synthetic marijuana. It was new, hadn't been heard of, not a lot was known about it. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about it and talk a little bit about synthetic drugs before I get into our story. Nowadays we have several different types of synthetic drugs out there on the market. There's synthetic marijuana, there's synthetic LSD, synthetic heroin, and the latest one that is now out, the most recent that I've heard, is synthetic opioid painkillers. So there's more and more coming out. Now, 6 years ago, like I said, it was new. All that we were really hearing at that point in time was some stories coming out of Salina, and they called it K2. Other names it went by were Spice, Potpourri, Mojo, Scooby Snacks, Mambo, and Annihilation. That's just to name a few. You could buy it in smoke shops. It was legal. They packaged it kind of like they do the big league bubble gum. It was like in foil packaging to attract people to want to use it. Nowadays, it's also used in vaping. Synthetic marijuana is made up of dried plant material that is chopped up in herbs in a mixture of colors. Like I already said, they use different packaging because they want to attract you to want to use it. But the active ingredients in it are actually sprayed on to the plant material, which makes it all the more dangerous and more unpredictable. And the reason why is because when you spray something on, you cannot spray it on evenly. So some pieces may have more, some may have less. And because of that, you have a huge range of side effects that can happen. Side effects include high blood pressure, blurred vision, heart attacks, vomiting, seizures, hallucinations, severe anxiety, paranoia, and what we've dealt with is death. Now, they use over 700 different types of research chemicals. These are research chemicals that are artificial. They're synthetic cannabinoids that are 100 times stronger than the natural drugs. These are not tested on humans. The packaging even says not for human consumption. These are things that you might find in rat poisoning. You might find in carpet cleaning things or any other type of cleaning product. And people are putting this in their body. It's a quick instant high that lasts about 20 to 30 minutes, making it highly addictive because once that high, you come down out of that high, you want another hit, and so on and so forth. The problem is, as we use drugs, whether it's prescribed by a physician, street drugs, synthetic drugs, whatever the kind of drug it may be, your body eventually gets used to it. Doctors will prescribe medication for, say, diabetes. Eventually your body gets used to that, and so then they have to change that drug up so that you still are getting the benefits you need to stay healthy. It's that way with street drugs as well. Your body's going to eventually get used to it, and you're going to look for something stronger, something more powerful, something faster to get you that high quicker. And so that's where these synthetic drugs are coming in, because they are quicker, they are faster, and they're cheaper because of that. As of May 2013, synthetic marijuana is illegal in all 50 states, and it is classified as a Class 1 drug. Now, about a little over a year ago, watching TV with my husband, a friend of mine messaged me on Facebook and said, "Are you watching Channel 3 Dateline NBC? They have a story about synthetic drugs on there." So we, of course, turned off the ball game and started watching the story on Dateline NBC about synthetic drugs. And this was about synthetic LSD. Now, there was a girl, of course, going to parties, so on and so forth. She heard people talking about doing drugs, so she did her research. She researched all the different kinds of drugs because she wanted to experiment, but she wanted to be careful about what she was doing. So she researched, and she decided she wanted to try LSD. So when she tried the LSD, she researched it, she decided that's what she wanted to do, so she started asking around to get in contact and where she could get some. Well, she was put in contact with a 19-year-old who all he had on hand was synthetic LSD. He decided that she doesn't need to know that it's synthetic. It's a quick $10, easy, we're good. She went home, friends stayed the night. They did what they thought was LSD. The girl who did her research died. The one, her friend, did not. And they were videotaping everything to catch everything that they were doing on tape or on their phones so they would know what they had done. One thing led to another. The police couldn't figure out why she had died because death and LSD didn't really go hand in hand with each other. So by the time they questioned people and got to the 19-year-old who had sold them the drugs, he said, yeah, it's synthetic, didn't think it was a big deal. Well, it was a big deal because it killed her. The state of Ohio right now has a huge problem with synthetic heroin. Huge problem that they're dealing with. The story, the latest one that was given to me by a friend who was actually doing some business in Pennsylvania last week was a pregnant woman. She was 33 weeks pregnant. She bought some synthetic opioid painkillers from a friend. She and her baby are dead. You don't always know what you're putting in your body. You can think you're putting something safe in your body, even if you do your research. But you may not be. You never know. You might think you're getting the real thing, but you may not be. In April of 2011, April 27, 2011, that's when we lost our son. But I'm going to go back a little bit further. A year before. He had come home from track practice, and he wanted to go hang with some wrestling buddies. Chris was an athlete. He was on the soccer team. He was on the wrestling team. He had gone to state wrestling all 3 years, freshman, sophomore, junior year. He had placed third his sophomore and junior years, and he had some big colleges wanting him when he graduated. He was on target to be a state champion his senior year. Unfortunately, we don't know if that ever would have happened because he died before that could. He was also a pole vaulter in track. Well, he'd come home, wanted to go hang out with some wrestling buddies. I said, okay. He left to go hang out with his buddies. His sister, who was also a pole vaulter, came home from track practice and goes, so did Chris tell you what he did at track practice today? And I said, no, what? Well, he told one of the coaches to F off. And I said, oh, no, we don't do that. I got on the phone, I called him and told him he needed to get home immediately. So he came home, and when he walked through my front door, he reeked of marijuana. He stunk. It was nasty. His hazel green eyes were gray. His skin was ashy. And I said, what are you on? Nothing. What are you on? Nothing. I grabbed him by the shirt and pulled him in and shut the door and threw him across the room to the couch. And I said, Chris, I need you to tell me now what you're on. I can smell it. I can see it. I know what it is, but you're going to tell me. We were smoking pot. Okay. You need to go take a shower and get that stench off of you, and then we will discuss this. Because at that point in time, he was high. He wasn't going to hear a word I had to say or his dad had to say at that point. So I needed him to go clean up and come down off that high, sober up a little, so we could have a conversation. You see, all three of my kids are adopted, because I didn't have children. Chris was born drug addicted. And so the chemical makeup in his brain, the minute he tried it, awoke that sense up. Higher chance of him becoming addicted. So he went and took a shower, I finished up dinner, he came out. At that point, we were able to kind of have a conversation again about how he could not do this. He wasn't like other kids that could experiment with drugs, because the chances of him becoming addicted were stronger because of the fact he was born drug addicted. We put him on our own house arrest at that point. And the reason why is because for his safety. We had to do something to help him. You can buy over-the-counter drug tests at Walgreens. So we put him on our own house arrest. He was not allowed to go out with friends. He was not allowed to do anything but go to and from school, to and from work, to and from practices for sports. And that was it. He was at home otherwise. And so periodically, I'd give him a drug test. Kept coming back clean, so after about a year we decided, okay, we'll let up the reins a little bit. He can start hanging with friends again. I had talked to parents of people he had been with when he came home that night high. So we had done everything we thought right. We did. And so we're going to fast forward a year to March of 2011. Again, he came home from a practice. And at this point, I can't remember if it was a track practice or a wrestling practice, because he was doing some extra wrestling stuff at that point. And he came home and he goes, hey, I'm going to go hang out with my buddy and his older brother. We're going to go up to the mall. And I said, okay, no problem. That's fine. And so they hadn't been gone from my house 30 minutes. And I had Hutchinson paramedics calling me saying, we are taking your son to the emergency room. He has symptoms of a heart attack. My son, who had just turned 17, was healthy as all get out, was wrestling, pole vaulting, very athletic, fit, healthy, was being taken to the emergency room for a heart attack. I was like, what is going on? As a mom, you start to kind of freak out a little bit. We didn't live very far from the emergency room, so I was able to get there very quickly. I was greeted by a police officer who proceeded to tell me that Chris had done K2. At that point, all I knew is what I'd heard on the news coming out of Salina, and that it was a synthetic drug. Other than that, I didn't know a lot about it until I researched it after that. All the police officer could tell me at that particular point in time was that it was a quick instant high, 20 to 30 minutes. You come down, you want another hit. It's addictive. It's untraceable in urine at that point. It's changed. So I said, okay. I walked into the room. Chris started crying. He said, I am so sorry, Mom. I will never do it again. Never say never. Because a month later he was dead. We got home, we talked about it, we really truly felt he'd kind of learned his lesson, but our hands were kind of tied because I couldn't do drug tests anymore because it wasn't going to show up. We kind of put the reins back on him where we weren't going to let him go hang with friends again. But if you want drugs, you can get them. He was able to get him. April 22nd, 2011, that was Good Friday. No school. Chris had slept in that morning. I had fallen the day before at work and, unbeknown at that time, had fractured my ankle. I could barely walk on it, so I had my daughter, who was 18 at the time, take me to same-day care to have it looked at. But before I left, I had told Trevor, who was 12 at the time, I said, hey, this is what I need you to do. Trevor's my singer, actor, computer person, he's my geeky kid. Nicole and Chris were my jocks. And so there was a 5-year age gap between Chris and Trevor, and so they kind of butted heads a little bit, oil and water. And so I knew I needed to keep them busy while I was gone. Keep them from fighting while I was gone. So I told Trevor, I said, Trevor, this is what I need you to do. Go wake up Chris. And when Trevor came back in, he goes, I woke him up, but there's a lighter on his floor. Why is there a lighter on your floor? Well, I don't know. Well, it doesn't just appear. Why is there a lighter on your floor? Well, I don't know. I didn't have time to argue with him. I was in pain. I didn't want to argue with him. I just said, give me the lighter. This is what I need you to do while I'm gone. He did everything I asked him to do while I was gone. Everything. I had Trevor upstairs cleaning his room. I had Chris downstairs cleaning the family room and switching some laundry around for me while we were gone. Nicole took me to the same day care. While we were there, my phone rang. I handed my phone to my daughter. She answered the phone. I'm listening to the doctor. I could hear Nicole's conversation, so I knew that there were some issues happening at home. And so we finished up with the doctor, started heading out to the car, and I said, well, what was that about? She says, well, the boys are fighting as normal. Okay. We start driving home, and my phone rings, and I answer it, and it's Trevor. And he goes, Mom, Chris is playing a trick on me. And I said, okay, what's he doing? Well, he's downstairs in the storage room, and he's pretending to hang himself. I have my 12-year-old on the phone. I cannot freak out at this point. I said, Trevor, I need you to go downstairs. I need you to start talking to Chris, and don't stop talking to him until Nicole and I get home. Just keep talking to him, keep talking to him. I don't care about what, just keep talking to him. I told Nicole to floor it. Chris was hanging himself. We hightailed it home. She's 5 foot, 1/4 inch tall. She's a little thing. She was in that house down those stairs and holding him up before I could probably get out of the car. By the time I got down, she was struggling to hold him up because he was about 5'7" at that point and weighed since wrestling was over, he was about 126 weight-wise. And she was holding him up. And so I pushed her out of the way and I took over holding him and I said, find me something to cut these. He had used jumper cables, and if you're familiar with jumper cables, how thick they are, I said, I need something to cut through these. Now, Trevor looks over, and at this point, Trevor's still fairly calm. He still thinks Chris is playing a joke on him. He reaches over and says, well, Mom, here's a box cutter. And I said, okay, hand it here. So I take it, and in one swipe, I cut through that jumper cable and got him down to the floor and began CPR. I told my daughter to call 911. And I don't know how long it was, but we had paramedics and first responders there immediately. They did what they took over. Police officers found K2 in Chris's room. At that point, we said, we got to get out of here. We got to get to the emergency room. We need to go be with our son. They told us to go. They would lock up. We left. We got to the emergency room and were greeted by the kid's pediatrician, Dr. Isenhoff, who also went through something very similar. He lost a son to a similar type of situation. And he gave me a big old bear hug and he said, this is not good. We have to life watch him to Wichita, and we cannot do it by helicopter. Because there's a huge chance that he's not going to make it there. So we're going to have to do it by ambulance. I said, okay, I'm going in the ambulance with him. I got it. He's not going to be alone if he's going to die on the way there. I had to promise that I understood that there was a chance he could die. God was on my side. Because the ambulance driver was the ex-wife of my high school basketball coach, and she remembered me from all the years before. And she was able to talk to me and keep me fairly calm as she drove to Wichita in that ambulance. The family followed behind. My youngest brother's girlfriend happened to be in Wichita at the time. She's now my sister-in-law. And she was over there, and she was able to meet me at the hospital and she was able to be there as the doctors came and talked to me because the other family members had not made it yet. And the doctors there said the next 24 to 48 hours are critical. They're going to tell us a lot. And I said, okay. So they got us in an ICU room. The first 24 to 48 hours, we had some hope. He would wiggle his toes if we asked him to. We got a couple thumbs up. Now you got to know, he was in a coma with life support, so he had a respirator. And we had that hope. And when his friends came to visit and told us stories, his blood pressure would go up a little bit if he didn't like what they were telling us, but if we laughed, then it'd go back down. So we knew he was hearing us. We knew that there was still something there. On the third night, however, I was sleeping in the ICU room, and something woke me, and I opened my eyes, and there was a gentleman with the respirator team. I don't know what their technical name is, but he's leaning over Chris, and he's trying to adjust the respirator, and it slid over to one side, and he was trying to center it back up. Well, it was making Chris mad, and Chris's blood pressure was skyrocketing. It was 300 and something over 200 and something, which is not good. That's very dangerous. And I told the guy he needed to stop what he was doing. He was upsetting Chris, he needed to stop. And his words to me were, "I've just about got it." And I said, "No, you need to stop." And about that time, all the sirens and bells and whistles started going off. Doctors and nurses come running in to try and stabilize Chris. He had gone into a dangerous situation. So they all ran in, they're taking care of him, they get him stabilized. The doctor turns to me and said, "You're going to have to make some decisions." This was not good. Our hope went from slim to none, like that. My husband came in shortly thereafter. He was sleeping in a room that they had given us off the waiting room. And he came in and I filled him in on what all had just happened. We walked over to Chris's bed and we told him it was okay. It was okay. We forgave him. And then if he needed to go, he needed to go. The next morning, the neurologist came in and she did not have a very good bedside manner at all. She was very rude. She just basically told us that was it. We needed to turn off the respirator and be done. And I said, and we basically told her to leave because we weren't very happy with her. And she did. And the ICU doctor came in at that point and told us that we had more options than that. We could keep him on life support indefinitely, which is no way for him to live, which he really wasn't living because at that point he was brain dead. Or we could turn the respirator off and see if by some slim chance he'd breathe on his own. Or we could turn the respirator off for about 10 minutes. If he did not breathe on his own during that time, we'd turn it back on to preserve his organs so that we could donate them. We chose to donate life. So later that day, we met with Midwest Transplant. They told us all of our options of what we could do. We decided what we wanted to do, and that was donate his organs and an 8x10 piece of skin off of his back for breast cancer patients, reconstruction for breast cancer patients. And we chose not to do his eyes because they would have been sunken in, and funeral we knew that there'd probably be a lot of kids and we didn't want, funeral-wise, the sunken eyes. We wanted him to look as much like himself as possible. So on the 5th day, April 27th, 2011, doctor, nurse, Chris's girlfriend, her mother, my husband and myself, my daughter, her good friend, Trevor, and my mom and dad were in this little ICU room as they turned off the machine. We sat there in silence for 10 minutes. the longest 10 minutes of my life. You still wanted to kind of hope that he would breathe on his own, but we knew deep down he wouldn't. He didn't. The machines were turned back on immediately, and they began the process of locating recipients. On April 29, 2011, a 13-year-old girl down in Oklahoma received his heart. She is now 19 years old, a freshman in college, just got her own place, and is doing very well. A 6-month-old baby received a liver. He was born with a rare disease that affected the liver. He is now 6 years old and very healthy. We have heard from his mother. A 30-year-old woman was on dialysis in very, very, very bad shape. She received a kidney and a pancreas. She is now a mom, something that was not possible before receiving those. Another gentleman received his other kidney, and he also is doing very well. He was also a dialysis patient. He just was not quite as bad as the woman was. 2 other gentlemen received organs. We have not heard from them, but we've been told that they're doing well. Eventually, hopefully, someday we'll get to meet them, all of these people. On the 27th, after the machines were turned back on, so they could begin the process of locating all these people to receive the organs, we had to get back here to Hutchinson because the church we attended at the time was going to do a prayer vigil. We had over 400 people there that night. And you have to understand, at this point, we hadn't told anybody about the drugs. That was just our inner circle of family. Everybody thought he had tried to commit suicide, that he was depressed, which couldn't have been anything further from the truth. He was a very happy-go-lucky kid. We listened to all these people get up and tell their own stories of suicide and their own attempts and their own depression. And when that evening was over, I looked at my husband and I said, we have to tell. We have to come out. We have to tell. That it was drugs. What kind of drugs and how dangerous they are. So at his funeral at the beginning of May, in front of over 900 people, I told our story. Our goal was to make a positive out of a negative situation. Chris's birth mother's choice affected Chris. Chris's choices have affected all of us, our family, his friends. My husband, he kind of shut down a little bit. Didn't want to talk about it too much. He eventually came around and we talked, and he's good now. My daughter turned to alcohol at one point. She is now a mother of 2. I have a 3-year-old grandson and an almost 1-year-old granddaughter. My daughter has struggled a lot because her and Chris were biological siblings, and she has struggled with it and hasn't really dealt with Chris's death too much until here recently. My grandson, who's 3 years old, looks just like his Uncle Chris. I have a moving picture frame, and there's a picture of Chris on there when he was 3 years old. Jace is 3 now. And one day he was looking at him, and he's like, Uncle Chris wrestling, Uncle Chris, what's Uncle Chris doing here? And we were talking about the picture frame, and it came to that picture, and Jace goes, Grandma, that's me. And I said, no, that's Uncle Chris. But you look just like him. And you're just as ornery as him, too. My grandchildren don't know their Uncle Chris, except for through our stories that we get to tell them. But his choices have affected us. Trevor was 12 at the time, and he had never really dealt with Chris's death too much either. I mean, he did a little bit better than most of us. Maybe because he was younger, I don't know. But about a year ago, He says, Mom, he says, you know what, I've thought about it. I've been thinking about it, and I don't think Chris was playing a game with me back then. I don't think he was trying to trick me. I think he wanted me to help him, and I didn't know that. And I said, Trevor, it's okay. You didn't know. It wasn't your choice. Chris made that choice. You did everything you needed to do that day when you called me. You did the right thing. Me, I talk about it constantly. It is my way of healing. That and my faith have gotten me through this last 6 years. We all make choices, and we all have to live with the choices we make. Sometimes we don't stop and think about the other people around us and the choices that we make, how they affect them, and the fact that they have to live with the choices we've also made for ourselves. In 2012, May of 2012, when Chris would have graduated and he would have been walking across the stage, we didn't really want to go to that graduation because it was going to be difficult. But a lot of Chris's friends, who call me Mama Sully, invited us to come. They wanted us there. And so we went. We knew exactly where Chris would have walked across that stage, but he wasn't there. Because of choices that were made. He had children's names picked out for when he became a dad. Those will never happen. He would have loved his nephew and his niece to pieces. He would have spoiled them rotten. But he'll never know them. You have to think about the choices you make. You don't always know what you're putting in your body, even though you think you might. You have to be careful. I speak because I don't want any other family to have to go through what we've gone through. When a child loses a parent, they're an orphan. When a spouse loses a spouse, they're a widower. When a parent loses a child, there's no name for that.
Does anybody have any questions or anything I'd like to ask?
Yes?
So do you know if he smoked it before?
That I don't know. I don't know if he ever tried it before that first initial time with the symptoms of a heart attack. I don't know that. He could have very well tried it before that point, because since it didn't show up on drug tests at that point, it wouldn't have shown up on any of the home drug tests I was doing. It wouldn't have even shown up on a drug test at the hospital, because